Hello and welcome to Journeys and Journals. This is quite the show, and I'd just like to show you the reason why. For better or for worse, for richer or poorer, in health and in sickness. And this was my mother's bowl, and it tells a lot about marriage. And my guest today is my very first husband, Doug Beck. It was December
27th, 1958.
And we said, I do, and we did, to this very day.
This day.
Why is it golden? That really.
They probably couldn't think of anything better to do with it.
50 years ago, Doug and Bernie looked like this.
Yes.
I remember it well, right here at the Lutheran Church up on
St. Paul's Lutheran, yeah.
5th Street?
5th and Manzanita, something like that.
And, well, this week, guess what? Doug and Bernie went back to the Lutheran Church and reenacted the same thing. And it seems to me like it's history repeating and worth talking about, because it's not just about us. I want to talk about Doug's family. The first one that we know of who celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary is
No, it's grandfather Sherman and Emma. They had 61 years of marriage.
And then came Grandma and Grandpa Heitzenroder.
Yes. And then Grandpa and Grandma Ballard.
And theirs is 60-something.
60 some odd years.
Their eldest son
was married for 70 years, as I remember.
75.
75.
That's Glenn and Garnet.
Yes.
Then we get down to the shorter ones, your mother and father.
Mother and father.
They were only married
55. 58 years, something like that.
How about your brother and your sister?
Yeah, they're still married.
And they're at 55.
55.
So it comes from a long line. I have great-grandparents that were married 65, and I have Aunt Mary and Uncle Bill that were married. They were from Brookings or Crescent City or Smith River or a tiny little spot, wide spot in the road called River's End.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where so much of the story comes together, because Aunt Mary, we wanted calla lilies, and Aunt Mary said, well, I'll just go to the neighbors and ask them all for their calla lilies, because in the middle of December, they bloom most years over at the coast. Well, this year for our 50th wedding anniversary, I'd so hoped. They had cold, cold weather. Freezing.
Global warming.
Tell me about your family. Why did they come to Southern Oregon in the first place?
There was a job here. In those days, you took what you could find, and we made 6 trips between South Dakota and Washington, Oregon, and California looking for that. And Dad got offered a job with the Air Warning Service in the Siskiyou National Forest because they were keeping the lookouts manned 24/7 looking for Japanese airplanes. And he took care of the radios up on those hills.
And how in the world, I mean, I've been up to a couple of lookouts, but you can't drive up there in the middle of the...
You snowshoe up to the top. Dad was young then.
He was young once. Well, that's like all of us. There's my mother as a young woman. And I was so fortunate that her dress had been kept, because this last week I slipped right into that dress. Had Kay Dickey, our dear friend, made flowers very similar to Mother's flowers. And her little daughter, Chloe, just dressed all up, and here she is with our nephew, Marcus, Alexander,
Yeah.
the little one, in the same church with the same calla lilies, the same, we just tried to reenact the way it was 50 years ago.
We didn't have Aunt Wilma's orchids, though.
Yeah, Doug, tell us about Aunt Wilma.
Well, Aunt Wilma was widowed rather early, and she took to breeding and raising orchids. She had her own little indoor garden that she worked in. And when she heard we were getting married, she says, "Oh, we're having orchids." And so she went around to everybody in the Orchid Society and collected every orchid in Santa Rosa, and they brought them up here.
I think there were 100 orchids.
Yeah.
Little ones, plaid ones, big
ones, yeah.
And that's why in this picture you see Bernie with the great big orchid, because that's what she thought I should be wearing on my going away outfit. The same jacket.
Yep.
And it's been fun to try to reenact this and think in terms of 50 years. We did just snap one of those quick pictures of the orchids, of lining up 10 of them that she'd brought. This is what happened 2 weeks before. Our church, called Gateway, decided we'd honor the people who have had long-term marriages. And it was the 50th anniversary for the Hyatts.
Yep.
And these folks have well past 50.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Mary went way past 50, but her husband, who you knew really quite well, passed away. So she's in the picture honoring Mary Bruth. Tell me a little bit about his story.
Who?
Mary's husband was in World War II on a ship in Pearl Harbor. So when you'd see his license plate, it said Pearl Harbor Survivor.
You don't see many of those these days.
That's why she was widowed.
Yes.
Yeah. 50 years. We've got the little sprays of orchids and the flowers with all the gold. My niece Heidi and her mother Robin, they thought they should reenact as much as they could, make all the things the way they were. And I'm so grateful. 50 years of history. Why don't you just talk about our attendance? Because Bill's so special.
Yeah, my best man was a fellow named Bill Gergel. And
you'd been through Boy Scouts together with him.
Boy Scouts. He went off to the Army. I went off to the Navy.
Who was the Boy Scout leader? Les Gergel, Bill's dad.
Yes. He was a smoker, and he had a stroke, and really racked him up, and then he died several years ago.
And then, of course, Henry Martin had just come home from the war.
From the war.
And so he had his crew cut, I think you guys, they called him. And he was
athletic cut, yes.
And Doug, the son of the flower orchid grower.
Yeah.
Now, on my side, of course, was my little sister Sharon. And then Bonnie Gergel, whose name is Maffett.
Yep.
And McLeod.
Patty.
Patty McLeod. Thank you, Doug. You helped me out. Diane Christie.
Yep.
These were some fun people, the growing up people. Well, the dress was still there, but we had to ask Angela who is the right size for the dress to wear that one. The little Chloe and Alexander were just priceless. It wasn't a big function. It was a little function just to remind us of the way it was when. I'm going to challenge you folks to think back over happy memories and reenact them, whether it's scrapbooking or whether it's coming on TV and telling your story, writing a love note or a family history note. These things last a lot longer than we do, and they are priceless to some. I mean, I would give anything for a videotape of my great-grandparents.
They didn't have videotapes then.
Oh, I know that. What do you have beside you?
Well, I've got a little pillow, which I think was what the ring rested on, and a
little white Bible.
A Gideon's Bible, yeah.
And that was, you know, we really even were able to get these same vases. People didn't know they were up in the attic of the Lutheran Church, but they found them there, and we were able to pull it all together. The photos that we have of both families and even the great-grandparents, you've got stories of over at the coast. I have stories about lilies at Brookings. What was your family doing over at the coast?
Once in a great, great while, we would go over to Crescent City and have a picnic on the beach.
What do you remember about those picnics?
They were cold.
Yes, indeed. I think Crescent City looks to be 5 degrees colder than Brookings, or 10.
Yes.
What's the reason for that, Doug?
Because of the Chetco Effect.
What is the Chetco?
Air comes down the Chetco River drainage, and as it slides down the hill, it compresses and warms. And when it really gets going, when you got a good east wind blowing, it'll run the temperature in Brookings up into 100 degrees. While around it, everybody else is sitting at their usual 54.
In the fog?
In the fog, yeah.
What else do you know about Chetco?
Well, you drive up the Chetco to go up to Snow Camp Lookout. I know that.
Why do you know so much about lookouts?
Because my father would take me around with him to go visit all these places, and I thank him for it because it was a wonderful thing to do.
And it set you up for a career as a...
It set me up to be a lookout on Onion Mountain.
And what did you learn there? You were a kid.
I was technically 18.
And able to do all the work.
Do all the things you needed to do.
Looking out for what?
Looking out for forest fires.
That's a real danger around here.
Yes, it is.
And your dad was?
He was the person that was the communication engineer for the Siskiyou.
How many lookouts were in Southern Oregon, Northern California?
I couldn't even begin to count them. Now they're all abandoned because they have other ways of tracking.
What's the way they do it nowadays?
Oh, they have ways of tracking the lightning strikes. And those are the biggest problems you have. Occasionally you have somebody that lets a campfire get out of hand, but it's all done by remote control, and you just keep an eye on the places where there were ground strokes.
Because forest fires play into Oregon history a lot.
Oh, yeah, well, that's where the Biscuit Fire came from.
And now about the fires that went on until rainy season.
Well, I've been on a few of those.
When you say on them, what do you mean?
I was over working on the fire, helping get it going. Well, to put it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before the rains came,
And the rains came, and they packed the cook stove into a Dodge Power Wagon, and they said, here, drive this down to the warehouse. So here I am in an old Dodge Power Wagon snaking up these logging roads, and it's pouring down rain. I'd never driven one of those before. It was fun.
Well, logging, yes, the logging roads did keep you
But
going.
You didn't go to sleep on a logging road, let's put it that way.
Why, Doug? Why was that different from any other road or mountain?
Oh, they just take a cat and slide it down the hill, and guys would drive in to pick up the logs, and that was the only use that it ever had.
Well, logging roads were scary for me as a kid
Yes.
because I was always sure the edge was right there or that it might be on fire.
So true.
I went by a fire out in Selma or out there in the...
The Rough and Ready fire out there past Cave Junction.
Right.
Yeah.
And I knew it was dangerous, but they needed a nurse, and my aunt went up there, and I went along just for the ride.
Hey, I like some of these pictures in this bottom book here, too.
Go for it.
Well, we have...
That's the way we were.
This is the way we were, going away. And here we are, cutting our cake. And for a change, we resisted the temptation to smash that into each other's face, the way a lot of people do. We just very politely gave each other a bite of cake. And here we are, ready to go off on our own. I mean, there I was, done with college. I'd been through my war. I had the world by the tail, and now I had a great wife. I didn't know how stupid I was. We sure did learn a lot after that. But I had a good wife to stand with me, and that made all the difference in the world.
Thank you, Douglas. Turn the page there and see what you got. I do like to scrapbook, but
And she does. Yeah.
this TV show is sort of an extension of scrapbooking. I had been able to capture stories in their own words, as they say on TV. It's been such an important thing, and some of the things that we wove into this were apples of gold in, forgot the book, something of silver, baskets of silver.
Oh, I was going to say apples of gold and lots of mold.
No,
well.
I don't think so. The number important thing is that we remember the happy times.
Yes, because there have been some pretty sad ones.
Yeah. You want to talk about the pretty sad ones?
Well, I'm looking at our daughter, who unfortunately died at the age of 5. And I'm looking at you, who unfortunately had a stroke 18 months after we got married, and left me wondering, what is this woman that I married? But we adapted, and we cooperated, and we survived.
Yeah. Now we're up to 50 years.
And here we are at 50 years.
I thought you had to be old to have a 50th anniversary. And I look in the mirror, I don't see an old lady.
I don't either. I look at myself and I see somebody that I don't recognize very much, but...
Well, there you are, and we have pictures of you 50 years ago. Folks, I hope that this is fun for you to see, and you'll look back and remember the times that it's just been okay to make a long-term commitment.
Yes.
The pictures that you found
Well,
are all about, this.
babies. We are. Oh my, this is our firstborn. And here she is at Christmas. And then with our secondborn, there she is with her Uncle Henry on a motorcycle that he had at the time.
Now, didn't she love that?
Oh, she did. She was just full of gumption.
This is our our son.
Yeah.
And
That's cranberry juice, by the way.
At his aunt's wedding, Aunt Sharon, and this is our grandson at Heidi's wedding.
Yes.
And they kind of
match.
They kind of match. The dress that I wore for this reenactment was the very dress that Mother's wearing here. No, that's 1934. And it was so much fun to be able to think in these terms of, this is like history. I have one little picture of our family. Folks, I guess I have regrets, of course, about why didn't we go to get more pictures of us together, but one of us was always behind the camera, right?
Yes.
So we have one little picture of our family, and out of all the pictures and all the things we have, now it sounds like I'm giving you an ad for Photodan or for your local
Artcraft.
Artcraft, yeah. That was the place that we got pictures way back when. I think it's fine to have digital cameras. Doug's digital camera snapped this one, and today he printed it out this size, but the other day he printed it out in an 8 by 10.
8 by 10, yeah.
And just a click of the button. No waiting 3 days or 5 days like we used to. There are so many things about living in the 2009 that we didn't even imagine. As you drove us away in your
1953 Chevrolet Coupe.
That was the way we moved north.
Yep.
Moved to Corvallis, where Doug finished his degree, and then on to Seattle and Boeing airplane. You got something to say about long-term commitments?
Well, it's like this one picture here of you laying in a hospital bed. Both eyes are black. You're mangled beyond recognition almost. But we survived it. We came through it, and we were better.
Yeah, it rearranged my jaw, my whole face, and so when I was at the dentist this week, I said, for my 50th wedding anniversary, I'm getting 2 new gold teeth. They had to rebuild all my teeth to make my mouth, to let my mouth close. You're right, Doug. We have stood beside one another's bed more times than we ever dreamed would be necessary.
Well, practically the whole 50 years, we have taken turns peering down into a bed saying, do you feel okay?
Yeah. So these are just things that I wanted to share with you folk out there, that this is the guy, as he calls it, my first wife. I call him my first husband.
Yep.
And I think that's the way it's always going to be. Here we are, honoring the vow that we made.
Absolutely.
Would you say Till Death Do Us Part was taken seriously?
It was taken seriously, and it was the best deal I ever made in my life.
Ooh. No, I know that there are times when things go different and it doesn't always work out. But I'm guessing that within our viewing audience, because we do know that there are a number my age, Doug's age, and that there's somebody out there who's remembering the day they had a 50th wedding anniversary, and all the family gathered around them, or all the neighbors or friends. And I tell you, friends are so wonderful because they came from Salem, Portland, and just,
Well, it's like when we got married. You know, there's the bride's side and the groom's side in those days. My side filled up 2 rows. Your side filled up all the rest of the church.
well, that was because the church people were right
Yes.
here, and my
Yes.
my family was. This is right from the heart, I guess I should say. Whatever situation you find yourself in, there, be content.
Yes, that's what Paul said. And I have resolved in whatsoever situation I find myself therewith to be content.
And it sure makes sense, because none of us would have ever plotted this life of ours. All the troubles you've just talked about, no one would ever plot it. But I'm glad we're here together. Thank you,
Yes.
Doug, for being my guest again on Better Life Television.
You're welcome.
And thank you, folks, for tuning in. I hope that your days will be golden, too. I'm Bernie Martin Beck, just saying bye for now. Here comes Doug.
Thank you, dear.